I am never going to agree to a roundabout over there.
Well, this project is stopping short of that intersection, and we'll address that whenever the time comes, Commissioner. And also, we've worked with tried to get a fast lane project with the I-70 and Turner Diagonal Interchange reconstruction. We've proposed a couple different ideas on that, so we're just waiting to hear back on which one we might get. So that's where that one is.
How much longer is the Turner Diagonal exit going to be closed?
That project is slated to be completed in July. So when that opens up, that ramp will open up as well. Amazon's going to have access in around June, but it'll be fully open. Riverview will be fully open, and the whole system will be open around July, mid-July.
Thank you.
Yep.
Next, we wanted to highlight some of the locally funded projects. These are the ones that we do entirely on our own, but some of the ones that we feel are also some of the more important. You see some corridor maintenance projects there. You got Parallel Parkway from really 81st to 90th. Anybody who's driven out that way in the past 5, 6, 7 years, notice there's a lot of frost heaves, a lot of utility cuts. So we're going to redo that section. The reason we've called out these projects separately from our regular NSRP or our neighborhood street resurfacing is because there's also some work we're going to do with concrete. We're going to do some curbs, some gutters, repairing some of those areas as well. So we've got that one. We've got 57th Street from Caw Drive up to State Avenue, and 47th from State south to Orville, and Orville from 47th over to 38.
Commissioner Bynum? Never mind. Thanks.
We have annual traffic signal projects that we look at. We call them our priority traffic signals. We've developed a list of projects, or a list of traffic signals that are aging and don't have the proper ADA equipment attached and all that. So we're reevaluating those, and we're developing a system where we design 3 at a time, and then the next year we build 2, and we keep moving forward to that way. We've always got something in the hopper, and we can keep updating our system. And part of our asset management philosophy that we're moving towards is doing these in an appropriate manner when we can tie them in with other utility work that's going on around the area, fiber connectivity, and also any other major street projects. You see our annual streets projects up there, which is, we used to highlight that as mainly our mill and overlay, our resurfacing, but you can see we're calling it out as preservation now because, like I said, we are looking at more of a proactive approach. So we're looking at crack sealing, micro surfacing, ultra thin surfacing, a bunch of other options that we've been exposed to here recently, and we're going to continue seeing demonstrations on. So we can bring those back, employ them, or use them in the county to try and get some better life out of our roads. And of course, our economic development driven projects. The one we've highlighted here is 11th Street and McDowell Lane. Currently, we put it out in 2021, but we are waiting on finalization on where that one might end up going. This is a graphic we love to show. The graphic itself pertains to streets, it really is a good representation of what we're trying to do overall. We've realized that if we let things fall to a certain level, all the way down here, it costs a lot more to rehab them up to an acceptable standard. So we've developed a rating system with most of our assets where once we get to this line, we know we have to start making incremental increases that will get us longevity out of our assets, and it saves us money in the long run too. A couple other projects that are in the hopper that we want to point out is our commitment to our trails projects. We've seen the desire from the community to increase our trail presence, so we're evaluating different possible trails, and you'll see a map of that here in a little bit. The quiet zone, everybody's pretty familiar with that. We're working with Union Pacific Railroad and Edwardsville to finalize some details on that. We've also seen a pretty drastic decrease in our park roads, the quality of them, so we've developed a program to resurface and repair a lot of our park roads over the next few years. That way it gets a better user feel when you're out in those areas that we want to attract people to. And our pedestrian access to transit is a joint project that we're doing with the folks within our transit and KTA to increase rideability. We're looking at building new sidewalks, increasing accessibility to our bus stops and areas like that, and looking at the areas that are currently underserved and that we might be able to get better service to if we just do a little more work. This is the graphic I was talking to you about the trail network development. We've gone over this before, but we like highlighting it. The vast majority of the colors you see are the light blue and the goldish yellow. Those represent potential possible trails. The blues are more bikeways that are meant for transportation along the road segments. And the orangish yellow is for multi-use purpose and recreational type trails that are meant to be off-road, taking you through, following some streamlines, things like that. We're working on developing a much more vast network to connect to our neighbors to the south, to the north, and the east. So as we move forward, we've put money in the budget every year to keep working towards this goal. Some of the new things you'll see when you look through your CMIP later are these projects. Fiber connectivity project is one you'll see. That has to do with connecting to a lot of high-value, I shouldn't say high-value targets, I should say high-value areas, police stations for the body cam use, schools, and other community centers to allow for better access and userability. Our Public Works Asset Management System, that is our game plan and our implementations for how we want to better develop our plans and our programs and projects to bring to everybody. This has to do with getting into actual information systems and really diving into how we can best work with our stakeholders in the community as well as utilities and other groups to make our projects the most beneficial. We've added the 131st and Leavenworth Road intersection reconstruction. That one is kind of based on if the new school gets developed. And Holiday Drive bridge replacements. Anybody who's driven out on Holiday Drive knows the 4 bridges that are west of the intersection of inland out there. Those are older bridges. They still hold capacity. A couple of them are undersized. So we're looking at redoing those, getting them outside of the clear zones, get rid of some guardrail, and potentially widening them enough for future development if that road ever decides to be widened.
Have you resolved the issue on that one with,
Undermining?
no, that too I would get to, but there's a bridge that, in my recollection, has been a source of dispute between the city of Quivira and that bridge just beyond I think it's just beyond the entrance. I call it a bridge. It's basically a culvert, and it has 2 little things that look like what a bridge might have. They have always disputed that they are responsible for that bridge, and that was historically. I don't know what they claim the status of that bridge is now, but don't be sucked into repairing that bridge for them, because that is their bridge.
These are the 4 bridges that are located a little further east than that, and you're right by naming them as culverts. Technically, they are culverts, but because of the size, they're technically classified as bridges.
So you're back towards what used to be the old town of Morris?
Correct. Okay. Yes. We identify them as Bridge 280, 281, 282, 283. But the one you're talking about, we're aware of that one, and we know the history on that one. Wayne Moody has been very adamant as well that we should not be touching
Good.
that one.
Maybe we could discuss that during the de-annexation process.
You bring up the de-annexation, and we are in talks with them about de-annexing some of the properties in that area. So that is one of these bridges could potentially fall in that area as well. So if we do that, we can eliminate that from our potential
Well,
scope.
that certainly, believe me, that goes back a long ways. And that bridge, well, I don't think it's ever been fixed because neither side will agree to repair it. They contend it was a county bridge, although it's always been inside the city limits of Lake Quivira. Okay.
Like I pointed out on the previous slide, the Waco Lake and Park Road repairs, we initially started this project a year ago doing some smaller repairs. We wanted to highlight this again just to show our commitment to this, and these are actually the larger items we put in to do full replacements of most of these.
On Wyandotte County Lake, Pearson Park, both of those roads, I think, need to be widened an additional lane for hike and bike off of the roadway. Is there any plan yet for those in terms of what, we're not just going to I don't want to just resurface Wyandotte County Lake Road. I want to rethink Wyandotte County Lake Road because for bicyclists and runners, it's fairly treacherous. So is there a plan to widen that road to make a trail next to it?
There hasn't been as yet, but it's definitely something we can engage our Parks and Rec and staff and look at. The issue at Wyandotte County Lake, as you're well aware, is some of the grades on the side of the road is quite steep, so it might take a little more time and engineering. So as we move forward, we are planning to phase this project and not do it all at once. So if we identify those areas that could be potential problems, we can certainly phase those in a different manner.
That's good. I just want to make sure that when we do those, particularly those two, I think we need to widen them and we'll get a lot more use out of them. Thanks.
But you have to do that without taking any trees out.
That is the hard part.
You're welcome to take out some trees. There's lots of trees.
I mean, the mayor's well known for his dislike of trees, so.
What are you talking about? I love trees.
The Lombardi Drive Sanitary Sewer Improvements project that you'll see out for next year, this area has a very aging infrastructure of our sanitary sewers. There have been several smaller failures that we've kind of band-aided together for now, but replacing the entire system really makes the most sense.
Where is Lombardi Drive?
By Wyandotte High School.
Wyandotte High School?
Yeah. And again, we wanted to highlight the Trail Network Development Program. That's the actual name we've given the funds we're allocating towards trails and sidewalks, as well as the Sidewalk Gap Program, which is what was identified in the standing committee meeting a couple months ago with myself and Zach Flanders from Planning. Commissioner McGee, we actually took your advice and kind of stepped that back a year to reevaluate how we can better assess the needs as opposed to just trying to jump in something that could potentially fail and backfire. So thank you for that comment. And this list is one of the more fun ones that we want everybody to see and get used to seeing more often. These are the projects that have been identified to us and that we have identified over the last several years as projects that need to happen but currently don't have a funding source. They're scattered throughout the county. This list is in alphanumeric order, so these is in no way listed by priority or anything, but we have had a consultant take a look at a few of these. That way we can get some better information on them. That way we have a stronger case when comes time to go to Mark or some other agency for potential funding source.
We can talk about some options on 72nd Street.
Absolutely. That's one of the biggest things.
Use
I
your microphone,
had one of
please.
those.
Commissioner, can you use your microphone, please?
Oh, you don't want to hear me. You really don't want to hear me. I had one of those epiphanies the other night, and you wake up in the middle of the night and you go, well, why can't we do this? So I'm not telling the world about this because I don't want to look stupid. So I'm going to tell you guys first. So you can tell me if it might work, okay? Sure. Something to help a little bit with the kids walking up and down that wide boulevard, et cetera. We'll talk.
Yes.
The idea with that is, like Brandon said, we have someone looking at some of these areas. So when it comes time for the next round of MARC funds, we have a good project, a good grant that we can submit. An idea, 72nd from parallel to Leavenworth Road, putting that on a road diet, walks on either side. Now we're going to connect from Leavenworth Road all the way down to State Avenue. So that's how we're kind of looking at this, getting that sidewalk network connected.
And I have an interim concept for you. I'll let you know.
Well, just so we're not forgotten, 34th Street from Metropolitan to Marion and 18th Street and 21st Street from Metropolitan to Marion Lane.
And Key Lane up there is one of the ones that we have.
Those are major arteries
Right.
that, since I'm out there, I see a lot of people use them.
Right.
And they are in need of repair.
Right, and those are definitely ones that we're having them look at for that potential funding.
I just want to say I'm really grateful that I'm starting to see a list now. I've been up here for a long time as commissioner, and, when constituents would come to me and say, what about this road, or what about this intersection? There was really no way to put that request on a list, because no one was keeping a list. And it seemed like at one point, some projects would move forward while others, nobody ever heard about again. So I really appreciate you keeping track, and I recognize it's not in any sort of order, but it's a start, and I think that's great.
Right, and it's been the direction we've been given by our new Public Works Director. I mean, it's taken a step back and looking at what we have and beginning planning. And so that's kind of how we've led to this, and we'll continue with the process.
And at any time you have input on any of these roads, or you think something else could work, feel free to let us know. Part of our whole game plan, our master planning ideology, is getting as much input as we can. That way, when we do move forward with a project, it is the most accepted and the most beneficial. Wanted to highlight a couple of stormwater projects. With all the rain that's happened recently, I'm sure everybody's had enough stormwater, but a couple of the bigger ones are the 51st Street north of Cleveland RCB. This is one of the last ones in a series of older boxes that need to be replaced. It'll have to do with some string bank fixes. We'll also do some native grass plantings and things like that. If you want to look at one similar, there's one just down the road at like 53rd and Roland. So if you want to look at something similar.
It looks nice.
The Strong Avenue Levee Pump Station and Flood Control is something that we've looked into and are working with the Army Corps of Engineers for involvement. There's a lot of continued involvement with them and developing this project, so there'll be some shuffling of that one, and Jeff can fill you in on that one more if you have some questions about that. 77th and Troop Storm Sewer Replacement is a 96-inch pipe that runs just south of Parallel Parkway at 77th, 78th right there. There was a failure in a parking lot in the area. We've got that fixed for now, but while we were doing that, the rest of the system kept having issues as well. So we've got to get in there and replace that before we have a major failure that causes 77th to basically collapse. A 96-inch fall would be a pretty big fall if that pipe were to go. And then these last two, 29th and Ohio Storm Sewer and the White Oaks capacity at 82nd and Haskell. These are projects you've seen for quite a few years. These are stormwater issues where the systems just weren't built to handle the amount of flow that's there now with all the development that's happened. A lot of the more impermeable surface has caused more rainwater to get to these pipes, and they're just undersized. Part of what we're looking at as an actual program, you see a little lower on the list, is our Stormwater Master Plan, NERU. We're actually taking a look at everything as a whole and trying to prioritize those projects in a more effective manner as opposed to just piecemealing them here and there.
And if you guys remember, for those who are on the Public Works Standing Committee, as we had come to you guys in the past, Bill Heatherman started it, talking about the rating system for these different projects and how we were going to put them in order. Well, as we were going through that, the new Public Works Director came on board, so we were kind of bringing Jeff up to speed on how we were doing things. We got a game plan. He suggested we take a step back, look at it, do more of a master plan that included our stream banks and so forth, and be able to put a good plan together that so when we set the CMIP, we're setting good projects throughout. So as you see 29th and White Oaks there, we have done what we call the preliminary engineering studies on those, and we know how much those are going to cost. Those will be in part of the Stormwater Master Plan. And they may stay where they're at, they may not. It just depends, but we are reevaluating how we're going to go about doing this.
One of the things, as you start into, I mean, I'm delighted to see the Stormwater Master Plan, because the Stormwater Master Plan ties into a sidewalk master plan, because if you don't have stormwater, it's very difficult to put a sidewalk in a ditch. And having a master plan with an eye to, I mean, from 38th Street to 72nd Street, pretty much river to river, all the way through our community, we have virtually no stormwater, sidewalk, curb, because it was built under the old county township rules, and the developers were not required to do it. So now we have inherited almost a third of our city without basic infrastructure. And as we're thinking about the stormwater, I want to make sure we're sizing it and planning it in such a way that anticipates all of our streets having curb and sidewalk. It took Overland Park 20 years and a special tax assessment to fill in all these areas in Overland Park. It's going to take us that long to fill in all of these areas. but I want to make sure that stormwater master plan anticipates, so we don't undersize something thinking, oh, we're never going to put sidewalks in this area and stormwater in this area. We should anticipate a master plan where we have stormwater throughout our city and where we have curb and sidewalk throughout our city. Because as we build that, then we can tie our sidewalk master plan to this, because when we do fix stormwater, we sure ought to go put a sidewalk in while we're doing it. So, yes.
I've looked ahead, and before we get down into the sewer here, Holiday Drive, one of you mentioned that. And is that road capable of being fixed with any assurance that it's not going to collapse again? And if not, are we looking at an alternative for people who live in that part of Wyandotte County to get out of that area as opposed to trying to continue it? It seems like to me Holiday Drive has been a problem, even back when I was a teenager.
Yeah, staff is currently working with Burns and Mac, going to continue to work with them to explore options. One will obviously be a rebuild. I've asked them to consider abandoning the road even, because I think there is risk in other segments of Holiday Drive that will have the same problem, and it needs to at least be considered. So we'll be exploring options.
It's been my experience that engineers are like surgeons. If you go see a surgeon, I'm almost certain he's going to recommend some kind of surgery. If you go to an engineering outfit, I'm almost sure they're going to recommend that they can engineer the problem. And that didn't work the last time. It didn't work several decades ago. That area will never be, in my opinion, safe until you just blow up those mines and collapse that structure inside there, which of course has certain consequences as well. Now, I know it sounds stupid, but I don't believe you're ever going to get that road to where you can guarantee me that that road will not collapse again.
Sure.
And then there we are again, spending $1 million or $2 million, patching it and pouring ash, fly ash down it again and water to simulate concrete. It's in my area. It's in Commissioner Markley's area. And, it's important to people who live there to have, a safe ingress and egress. They have inland, but that puts them a little farther north than where Metropolitan would put them. There's Berry Road, there's several others, but all of them will require expenditures. And I guess, for what it's worth, I would tell you that putting a lot of money into Holiday Drive, in my opinion, and I'm no engineer, is you're throwing good money after bad. Okay?
That is part of the geotechnical work that Burns and Mac's going to do for us. They're going to evaluate current conditions based on, and compare it to what it was, 10, 15, 20 years ago. That way we can make those assessments. And you're absolutely right. Any of the other options around that area would require a decent amount of improvement, but that cost-benefit analysis is part of what they're doing in coordination with us.
So for the foreseeable future, what, a year, 2, Holiday Drive is going to be closed?
It's tough to say, honestly. There's a couple options we're looking at for a shorter term fix while we're doing that. But, just to reopen the road is still probably a couple $100,000. And we're not sure if that's the most beneficial use of the money.
Make a great trail. I know somebody that really like it as a trail.
All the four-wheelers that go up there now, I'm sure would love it if we just closed off that whole area.
Oh, it'd be wonderful. I mean, the outdoors and everything, there's people that would just spend millions on something like that.
Glad to see you're coming around,
I
Commissioner
am coming
Walker.
around, Mayor. I'm finally seeing.
Just as long as your arms don't start
Finally
flying.
seeing the light. All right. To the sewer.
To the sewer, yeah, let's move to the sewer.
Yeah.
We can certainly move right on to the sewers. We've shown you this graphic several times before, but we like bringing it up so we can show you that we have moved forward from our phase 1 studies and all of that and all of the work. We are now in our phase 2 of our consent decree, and we are looking at our systems and trying to figure out how to do the big projects that need to be done in the most effective ways. We'll highlight a couple of the bigger projects here in a couple slides, but we just want to make sure that everybody's aware we are moving forward, regardless of some of the roadblocks we've hit, but we are moving. This kind of outlines our 5-year plan. We show some of the figures in 10-year because some of the projects are large enough that they truly warrant 10 years worth of look. But for this purpose, we've kind of cut the numbers in half to show you just the 5 years. So some of the things we're going to be focusing on are some green infrastructure improvements. We've taken several steps within our organization to promote green infrastructure, and we'll talk about those. Some of the larger sanitary sewer operations is the construction of our Wolcott plant, and some upgrades to our Plant 20, which is out at 88 or South 88th and Gibbs, south of K32, which actually Plant 20 takes the primary load right now from pretty much all of western Wyandotte County. So it's a pretty big undertaking to make that useful. So there's a couple things we need to do to that. And then also our basic system renewals and a couple other capital things we need to do. Our SCADA system improvements, which is our communications between our pump stations and our treatment plants. Now, if something happens, we know about it in a more timely manner. And just our regular upgrades and repairs to our treatment plants, our pump stations, and our system itself.
One of the things I want to point out about this, look at the amount of money we're going to be spending. We're spending, I can't do that math fast enough, $200 million. I want to make sure that we look at increasing the number of employees at the unified government to do this work over the long term and not just hiring contractors. That guarantees residency for our community. It's workforce development for our community. We know we're going to pay good wages as unified government employees, and there's enough long-term work to guarantee it makes it worth hiring someone. But the more we can localize this workforce, even if we hire a local contractor, they may be in Kansas City, Missouri, the workers could live anywhere in the region. I want to make sure folks live in Wyandotte County who are doing this long-term work. So I want to make sure we have a plan for ramping up our public works department to do this work locally. Can you speak to that, Mr. Fisher?
Sure, and you might recall you approved a number of new positions in this year's budget that we're working to fill. And we'll continue to evaluate that, make sure we got the right balance of staff and private partners to make sure we get this and are successful here. But I get your point completely.
Yeah. Every dollar we turn over in the community more than once is more success. So I just want to make sure because this isn't going anywhere. This is just the next 5 to 10 years. This project's only going to grow. And I want to make sure it's Wyandotte County citizens who are doing this work.
As we mentioned, one of our larger pieces we're focusing on is green infrastructure. You see a couple different examples here of how to better deal with stormwater as opposed to just doing curb and gutter everywhere. That's been the common accepted way to deal with it. There are other ways that we can look at. We've actually reallocated one of our engineering staff members to a green infrastructure position where she is evaluating all these potential options on all of our projects.
It's just not our projects, but private development as well. She'll be taking a look to make sure that they're taking advantage of opportunities, so forth, that we can get a good product out of that.
I want to also, speaking of this private property, we make everyone put in those retention and detention ponds. I forget which is which, so whatever we ask them to put in. Do we have a plan to make sure they're keeping those scraped out? Because I can tell you the one at 76th and Parallel, that senior housing on the south side of Parallel, their pond filled in 2 years ago, and it's just a nice little tree grove. But there isn't any retention left in that pond. So do we have an active plan to make sure people are maintaining this infrastructure they're required to put in? Mr. Tobin?
Not only that, Mayor, it's a pet peeve of mine that go to the intersection of 98th and Parallel, look at the northwest corner. here we are, one of our signature intersections in the whole community, and it will continue to grow as that develops out with Children's Mercy and the Soccer Institute. And that detention area is right, it's a focal point of the intersection right now. This is something that we've got to take out of these plans. This is a change that has to come into planning and has to come from you, the board, the elected officials, because as current engineering and best management practices dictate, sometimes these things have to be located at these parts of the property. And we either have to change the design on those or we have to move them somewhere else. That ruins that intersection.
But to answer your question, yes, there is a ordinance basically that we follow that the private development is responsible to provide inspections of their BMPs every 2 years. It's just something that it's taken some time to get going and trying to get some teeth. It just really had turned over. We have just started this part of it. The first part of it, we went ahead and did inspections for the private developments to kind of get them to understand what we would be looking for. We met with the owners, we took them out, we explained to them, this is a bad thing. You shouldn't mow this, as Mr. Tobin wants it mowed, but in some aspects it shouldn't be mowed. And so we kind of went through all that with them. But yes, there is that program out there. It's just trying to get teeth. A lot of it comes down to getting someone to file a maintenance bond, if you will, once the project is done. So it's on file. We know what they're supposed to be doing, and we can kind of hold them to that if they don't do it.
Do you have staff capacity to oversee this?
That's kind of where we're at right now, is that it's kind of where we don't have what we need. We have one inspector that we designate as the MS4 inspector. This gentleman basically, though, is dealing with a lot of erosion control, all the construction projects. Any illicit discharges that may come in, he goes out and investigates them, does the paperwork, meets KDHE if they're involved, and so forth. So the inspection portion of that, of the BMPs, is part that we're having trouble with.
It's a conversation in our industry across the country as public works agencies are wrestling with how do you hold the private developers and the property owners accountable to these detention ponds and the BMPs, make sure they're maintaining them properly. Like Brent said, we'll continue to work on that. Some agencies are using development agreements or the plat to give that teeth so that we can then hold them accountable. And I'm sure we'll be working with the legal on that kind of thing as well.
Okay. Commissioner Philbrook?
So am I hearing that, how much more manpower would it take, to follow up on what the mayor's saying, to actually cover that? Is that a whole other person? Is that a half a person? Do you have any idea? Or are you just cutting your teeth on it now?
We're basically still trying to cut our teeth on it and figure out exactly the best way. I mean, we're lining out what we think would be a good plan and how to go about doing this and implementing it. A lot of it, though, is even trying to get a hold of an existing owner, to do some of the work or whatever. But yes, I mean, staff is always nice. I'm not going to sit here and say, no, we don't need the staff. But the idea is to get the program put in place to see what we would need once we have that developed. I mean, we have ideas and we know what we're going to try to do, but until we have it really, the process and systems in place, it's hard to say, yes, we need another FTE, or no, we're fine, we can use what we have.
Sounds like the chicken or the egg problem.
Yeah, you might
Yes.
recall, we've reorganized engineering recently. We've added Jack, who he's mentioned as a MS4 inspector. We're building the systems that we need across the board, and it's likely we'll need an FTE or half an FTE for something like that to be really good at it. But we're still evaluating that.
Well, I appreciate your candor.
Okay. Thank you.
One of the biggest pieces that jumps out at everybody is the Wolcott treatment plant. This is the layout of what the finalized plan will end up looking like once all the phases are completed. We've got this stretching out over the next 5 to 6 years with an estimated $27 million. So it's a very large portion, but it is a very needed portion of the budget that's assigned for this.
I wanted to go back one slide to the number 7, Big 11 Lake, our concrete bottom lake. Is there a plan for that to put it back into the ecosystem? Do you have a plan for Big 11 Lake?
I can't say we have a plan yet. It has been a discussion as of early this week or last week, if I recall. It's something everybody's interested in. I learned some things in that discussion, like how deep it is or how deep it's not. And apparently we experience fish kills periodically. That's probably because it's not deep enough.
It's very unpopular when the fish all float to the surface.
Yes, I imagine. So we're working on it. I would
Okay.
imagine we'll have something this year, some plan this year.
No, that's right. Thank you.
So we highlighted Wolcott. If the next biggest project that's one specific location is our Plant 20 screenings and UV disinfection process. This is a quite interesting process, actually. It has to do with lowering UV lights actually into the water to kill microbes and bacteria. It's pretty interesting to see happen, and whenever it's turned on, you see the water literally is green. It looks green and looks disgusting, but it's actually getting clean. It's kind of a misnomer, but it's a huge undertaking. We initially had this budgeted out in 2019 and 2020, but we had a failure that happened recently, and we had to move part of it up as an emergency for this year. So that's why you'll see that new money in the 2017 portion of the budget. And everybody's familiar with the spaghetti map. Just to re-highlight how aging our infrastructure is in most of the areas that we're tasked with taking care of. The red highlights everything that was built prior to 1960. So this is part of one of our giant asset management undertakings, is the evaluation of all this and coming up with systematic plans on how to address these concerns in an effective manner. We'll move on to buildings and logistics. We don't have a representative here. John and Don were busy this evening, but we'll try and cover as best we can. Some of the existing projects that were in the CMIP are listed here. The Memorial Hall HVAC upgrades, the juvenile detention center is the big one that everybody's kind of seen here recently. Some jail renovations, the police tow lot, and improvements to the Reardon Center and the parking lot across the street itself. And some of the newer projects that you'll see in there in your CMIP are window replacements at Memorial Hall. Some of the window sashes are wood and rotted out and just cause a lot of issues. Health Department building upgrades, these are cosmetic as well as ADA improvements, a new roof, things like that. Justice Complex cooling tower, they're still evaluating whether a replacement or repair of that is an option. Upgrades to the courthouse itself with some HVAC system. As anybody who's been over there in the middle of summer knows, it's kind of a nightmare. The roof is, if I remember quoting Don correctly, the roof is over 25 years old, and on a flat tar roof like that, that's just not.
You're talking about the courthouse itself or the
Correct.
jail?
The courthouse itself.
Okay, so when's that going to start?
These are ones that are now in the CMIP. I don't remember what year exactly off the top of my head, I'm sorry.
So when you do the HVAC system for the courthouse, we're going to move that air cooling unit out of the front yard? By the way, any company that put their air chilling unit in the front yard would be fined and required to move it.
We'll note that and address that.
When you build that roof, build it so you can put the whole system on top of it where it belongs.
But not so you can see it.
Thank you. Not so you
Yeah,
can
not
see it.
like, we have these beautiful Cerner buildings, sorry. And then the first thing you see when you drive down 435 are these air conditioning units on the top of the building.
Which were supposed to be screened, and they fought us on it. And if you look at their new buildings out of Bannister, they managed to screen them.
Oh.
Just saying.
Yeah.
Did you have something, Commissioner? No? We recently have taken ownership of 5440 Kansas Avenue. We're looking at turning that into a multifunction maintenance facility. There are several things we need to do to that facility to get it up to its full capacity. We're looking to be in there shortly with some minimal effects, but over the next 5 years, we're looking to spend about $800,000 to really get that up and running with all the equipment needed to handle some of our larger pieces of equipment.
How big is that building, do you remember?
Like,
30,000 square feet. It's about 30,000 square feet.
and part of our continuation for planning and assessment needs is this last item, this buildings and logistics, asset management, and inventory. This is also part of our consent decree with the Department of Justice for ADA accessibility, was to inventory all of our buildings and come up with plans for how to address a lot of the situations. This inventory will also include all the pieces of equipment within the building, like the boilers, the chillers, the AC units, that kind of stuff. That way we can start regularly scheduled maintenance plans and monitoring and proactive fixing of things, as opposed to just a boiler went down, so now we've got to overwork the others while we replace it.
Commissioner Bynum?
I might be ahead of your slide, but is there any conversation around looking at our county annex building, either for a new location or upgrades and improvements, particularly to parking?
There is actually a line item in the CMIP for $225,000 moving out from starting this year and moving out continually for annex upgrades and parking improvements. Those are just for the current building. I don't believe there's a plan for looking at something new at this time.
At the current location, is there room to build more parking?
The grassy area that's just to the north and west of the current employee parking areas, we do own that, and we are currently engaged with a consultant who's developing a parking lot plan for that.
Okay. Yeah, I was there Monday, and I realize it's kind of a busy time right now because they're hearing all the appeal cases. But, man, the cars were just crawling around that place, waiting for somebody to leave so they could park and go inside and do their business.
I just want to thank all of those people for coming to pay their taxes.
If they were like me, they were appealing their taxes.
Well, that's right. And that too, it's all part of the process. Okay, I'm really concerned about the courthouse. So when we do fire alarm system upgrades, we're in a historic structure. Are we applying for historic tax credits for this project, for this building?
We will, Mayor, as we move forward with that project to consolidate that fire system. As you know, that building has numerous patched-together systems, both for the fire alarms and for the HVAC. One of the things we'll correct with that improvement to the HVAC system is to get it all in one system, or as close to it as possible. And that's what we're trying to do with the fire alarms also.
I just want to make sure that, I know that, and I'll just say this about my experience with engineers sometimes, is sometimes engineers are more interested in saying it works than it looks good. And I want to make sure in this historic building that we're not running conduit across marble or across stone facades or making it look crummy on the inside and say, well, it works. I just want to make sure that we're using historic tax credits. And when you're replacing HVAC and fire alarm systems on a building of this quality, we only have one of these in our inventory. Well, this and Memorial Hall are really our two super buildings that we have to protect. So give me some assurance that this is going to look really nice when it's done.
Mayor, I couldn't agree with you more. Those are our two legacy buildings, and we have to take care of those. And we will approach the tax credits wherever we can. Also, most of this, in the centralization of the CMIP, of the HVAC and the fire alarm system, most of it's going to be down in the sub-basement. when it's finished. Believe me, we're not going to do anything to deface that building.
Well, and here's where my trouble is. I want to make sure the people who are making the decisions on the interior are not the same people who put the air handler in the yard in front of it. You know what I'm saying? And then put the backup power system right next to it and planted 4 small trees in front of it so that maybe I would forget about it. But if we have a 100-year-old building that is beautiful and we can't mess it up with crap and litter around it or in it. So I just want to make sure that we're spending the money we need to spend to do this right.
So noted, Mayor.
Thank you.
Does anybody else have any comments on this slide?
Other than I agree with you.
The building down below, run all the conduit you want. I mean, run it. It can be all mismatched for all I care.
Oh, what an attitude.
The one above it needs to be just right.
Mike said, duly noted. We wanted to bring to everybody's attention some of the annual projects that Buildings and Logistics do. While some of it may seem like it goes underlooked, one of the big determining factors is the minimal amount of budget that has kind of been assigned for these duties. Fixing up our parking lots at only $1 million a year, with all the lots we have going around. The building upgrades at only $325. That's split up between elevator upgrades, ADA accessibility, floor remodels. Some of the police and fire stuff have their own, but some of it comes out. And also the biggest piece of that is roof repairs. Those are all very high budget items that take a lot of time and effort. So as we move forward with these, you might start seeing some increases in these line items. But we wanted to point that out.
Yes, Commissioner.
So, for instance, on this lovely City Hall building that we have, how often should we have to replace this roof?
I'm sorry, Commissioner.
I'm sorry.
The roof on this building?
I didn't mean, yeah, on this City Hall building.
There were some patches that were put in, but this is the project that we just went through. That was the first full replacement of that roof since the building was
How long had we
constructed.
really been needing it before we finally did it,
Oh,
though?
for several years. They moved in this building, I should say this, we moved in this building in 1973. That was, it probably needed a roof in the 90s.
Okay, all right, so about every 20 years anyway, or sooner if we need it. So,
and-
well, I'm just asking that question because it goes to show how long we push things off and how much damage we can have because we don't address it soon enough. Now, and I'm not saying that we spent our money wrong, that's not at all what I'm saying. It's just a very difficult decision, as you're talking about right now, about us having a little pot of money and trying to do all of these things with it. And so the more information, thank you, that you give us on how much it costs. So for instance, how much is it going to cost us to do the parking lot by Reardon Center?
That's a $500,000 project.
That's
Commissioner.
$500,000 by itself.
And that's slated for this summer.
And really?
Yeah, it's now.
Really?
It's now.
Yes.
So I'm giving you a bad time about it, but I've been griping about that parking lot for a long time, so thank you.
I also want to point out the word guardrail. Philosophically, I'm opposed to metal guardrails in urban areas because I think they look crummy. I think when we look at State Avenue and the guardrails they did with concrete, nice looking, retaining, I mean, we can do guardrails nicely without the typical highway metal crummy looking ones. So when I see guardrail up there, I just want to note, I don't want to litter our city with blight, with brand new shiny metal guardrails that shouldn't be here.
Some of that, Mayor, refers to a different type of guardrail. If you look at parking lot C, which is the one attached to Security Bank, 7th in Minnesota, it's a more modern type of guardrail, stretched with wire that comes through the deal and nicer looking wood posts. I'm not saying they look real good, but that's not your typical side of the road guardrail that we put in, you know, that was put in on the urban roads, suburban roads.
Can you
over the
send
years.
us a picture of that?
I can get one for you. I don't have one right now.
Like the parking lot at the BPU building, behind the BPU building, it has the wire cables.
Yes. yes.
It looks better. Okay. All right. Thank you.
There's another big piece that we wanted to highlight as far as parking lot improvements go, and that has to do with the improvements that we're making to Lot D, which is the lot that's attached to the Justice Complex on the backside of the jail and everything. There have been a lot of concerns about that complex, so we are, we'll talk about that in the next slide, but I just want to make sure that everybody was aware that we are addressing those concerns. So this is kind of a breakdown of what we're looking at the Memorial Hall HVAC system upgrades. So you can see there's a lot of big ticket items on there that are vital to the function of that building. And if we can get everything functioning right, we can actually use this building more effectively.
Yep. Go ahead.
It's interesting that you would say that. What uses are being put to that building right now?
Mr. Bach?
I would say that, I mean, we don't have a lot of uses coming into it right now. We have the Roller Warriors that are over there, and they have their campaign throughout the year, and they have their events, but then they use it through the week. We have a few different special events that'll come in, you know, from the boxing, or maybe there's some that'll mix in like that. And then graduations are probably others. We also are starting to see more rentals now that we've finished the ballroom. So we're starting to get weddings that are coming into that area that'll come up in the upper ballroom.
Well, my point being.
Which may be
we're
one
gonna
of the
s-
bigger attractions.
If we're gonna spend almost $3 million, and I'm not sure it won't be over $3 million by the time we're done, we need to put that to better use. We used to have in-house management of concerts. Now, I'm sure that day's long gone in the world of entertainment, but as you know, we had, well, maybe you don't know, but we had Mike Springer,
Had big names there.
Frank Hover, and I don't know how they did it, but they always worked with people and got great concerts here. It's a great concert venue for the right size audience. For years, we rented it out to somebody for more money, just simply so they wouldn't use it as a competitor to Sandstone or Livestrong or whatever it is now.
Live Nation.
Live Nation. And, you know, I'm all for, you know, preserving this building, upgrading and doing all that, but I kind of like to see a coordinated plan of operation. I really don't think the Roller Warriors are the best and highest use of that building.
Have you been to the Roller Warriors yet?
That we should, I've seen their like before. I mean, we used to have professional wrestling with Bob Geigel and the old-time pro wrestlers over there. I mean, so,
They've actually.
all I'm saying is, okay, spend the money, but don't leave the building, just is there anybody working on a plan for using it?
Well, having a heating and air conditioning system that works and having some parking that we're working on, we're gonna
Plus
have
an
we're
elevator.
gonna have and an elevator, we're gonna have a marketable asset that we should be proud of and use.
The old building and they'll come theory?
Well,
No.
I will say this, putting the elevator in was the first step we took. That made it a viable event space. And I will say, event space that we're still getting out there as far as how we market it, put it into use. I think we're very affordable at this point. We have some sound system changes that we're working with this year. Those are a couple of key things. Then making sure you don't lose your air conditioning and the heating and everything else that goes with it, which are, and I think you recognize the fact, improvements we have to do to this building, there are legacy things, or we're gonna let our memorial go away. I mean, we have to spend money on it, whether we use it or not. But yes, I agree, making it a viable space, and it seems to be probably one of the more attractive things for this space is some of the event space we have going for us today. And we may be able to continue to increase the value that it takes to that. And as we've talked about, and we started to make the move on the attached parking that'll be there for event, that'll help us even more. So there are some things I think will continue to make this a bigger player from that market standpoint. Does it offset 2.75 million? We're a long ways from that, but it's to make it a good use of space. 2.75 million is because, and that's over years. It's not like we come out and we spend it all in one chunk, but I mean, it's just been noted that every time we touch something over there, it seems like it has
Disintegrates.
multiple zeros behind it to fix it.
About how long do you think it's gonna, I hate to ask that question, about how long do you think it's gonna take to do the renovations and upgrades for Memorial Hall? I mean, how many years are we talking? I don't mean completely done, but to a point where it is a viable opportunity for us to get some money back off of in a
Commissioner,
decent way.
I will get you a planned schedule for that, for all of you. I don't have that up right now.
Okay. Just trying to get an idea of, money out, money in sort of thing. Because I know as more things get done, we'll be able to bring more people in to use the facility. And a big thing that I would tell you, because I've tried to set up some activities for Wyandotte County with folks, the big thing is the parking. That is one of the biggest things that we hear about. So when we get that parking, I think it'll make a big deal. That, and as you say, the elevator that you have in there now, because that's a long walk up those ramps, and for people to try to take food up and down those ramps to have a dinner up there is pretty interesting. So thank you for the elevator.
And
Well,
we do get historic tax credits on, I think, just about every project we've been able to do at Memorial Hall over the years. So that helps bring down the cost.
And that parking not only should aid Memorial Hall use, but should aid in just the overall downtown parking issue with the government buildings.
Okay.
Currently, for these particular improvements, we're showing having them done by the end of 2018. So it's a fairly...
Good, I'll still be alive.
No guarantees for any of us.
Hey now.
No, I'm just saying, none of us have a guarantee.
And it was sad. Sewers, death, I mean.
Moving on.
Moving on.
This is the slide I spoke of earlier about the courthouse, or the parking lot improvements to Lot D on the backside of the Justice Complex. Currently, it's an open garage system where they've got lift gates to get in there. We're looking at putting guarded garage doors like this, roll-up garage doors, similar to what's in the VIP section now, but they're a little more see-through, so it gives a less metallic appearance. They're secure, but they are a little better. We'll have 2 of those at the entrance and 2 at the exit as well. We're going to be doing some of the lower level currently has some open air window look to it. We're going to be putting some fencing up there so people can't just jump into that area, so to secure that area a little more.
Is this going to secure where our judges park?
Yes.
I think that needs to be a high priority in terms of securing where our judges park every day.
Yep.
Thank you.
We also wanted to highlight some of the fire station items that are within the budget. We've added our implementation for new fire stations has been broken out into 3 years, 2017, 2019, and 2021. Running about 4.2 million for each, and 4.7 in 2021 for potential inflation costs. This number does include design and land acquisition if needed. We're evaluating potential options to get more bang for our buck on design. Jeff had a meeting with Chief earlier and to discuss those. So as we move forward with different design options and things like that, I'm sure we'll be coming back before everybody to discuss those more.
And we're gonna break ground when? On the one in 2017?
In the second half of the year, should be breaking ground. And also, to go back to the parking garage structure for a minute, that is a 2017 project for the security of the judges.
Thank you.
We also wanted to highlight a couple of the remodels and renovations that the fire department has put in over the last couple of years to fix up and renovate the existing fire stations that are out there. We're looking at about $600,000 a year between different funding sources, and headquarters alone over the next 2 years, you're looking at 165,000 for remodels for headquarters right here down the street. Yeah.
Commissioner
I just wanted to put in a request right now. It seems like a good time. The station at 81st and Leavenworth Road, the old stone wall is all fallen down on the ground. And I think we have a stonemason in our Parks Department. And I'm just asking,
I think we have a
if we
bulldozer in our
could-
fleet center.
we need,
We need a
So
new
we
fire
need-
station there.
we need a, yeah, I mean, yes, I didn't want to get ahead of myself, but
Just push it over.
What I would like to request there, Mr. Brock, is a combined police and fire. So we'll be working on that. But in the meantime, if we could repair, and you know that, because the orange fencing is there. But I drive by it every day, and I think,
That's the one that flooded,
when can we put this
or
wall
the sewer
back
back
together?
there.
Commissioner,
Yeah, before that,
I
sewer
got
back
to
there.
correct a couple things here. We do not have a stonemason in the park department, and that's
Okay.
why that hasn't been fixed yet. But I will let you know when it's slated to be repaired.
That building has been flooded. It was nearly pulled over by a truck.
We need.
Yes.
That thing needs to come down.
It does, but in the meantime, I'm just asking us
All
to
right.
fix this.
So Mayor, are we having a vote? There's 4 of us that say that should be a police and fire right there. Is that what I heard you say, Mayor?
I'm just saying. All right. Also, we get historic tax credits on the original downtown fire station, is that right?
Should.
I believe so, Mayor.
Yep, okay. That's a building worth keeping forever as well.
In keeping with the
Look how nice it
idea
looks.
of keeping everybody abreast of the different projects that we have in our hopper but are currently unfunded, we wanted to throw a couple really clusters of projects up here as far as the buildings and logistics area is concerned. The courthouse and court services renovations, that has to do with kind of the new or the new juvenile center area and everything. This is a very large multi-phase project that we're evaluating several different options for. And we'll be bringing that back to you more as we get more elements of that figured out. Our communications center updates. There's just some electrical and HVAC systems that need to be worked on in order to make those systems, that area a little better. And the last one on this list is the One McDowell Plaza, or our City Hall structural renovations. This is something that's been brought to our attention for a few years now. When this building was developed, there are a couple issues with the plaza area itself. We can go into that more in detail at a different time if you want. But
If I might, we're waiting on a report from the structural engineer that we should get at the end of next week to give us the current status of the tower as it sits right now. And we'll update you when we get that.
And we'll be making a presentation in June, special session in June, on the first bullet point, the courthouse, court services.
And you'll note that 2 of the projects on here are quite large. And there are, particularly on the courthouse renovations type approach, as we went through, we did this when we went through and looked at the new juvenile center facility, to say, we pushed Trainer, who was the architect working on that, to go ahead and look at various options within our courthouse structure of how we could do different phases of improvement. So while we have the one facility improved and put on here, and I'll note, that's in the budget right now. As we've gone through and further worked through it, we've raised it about $2.5 million because we wanted to work in more of the courtroom space that was over in the old federal building, and then also move some of the community corrections employees that work with the juveniles over into that related space a little bit better. So the budget that shows from the debt that Debbie went over at the beginning is based on our adopted budget. This shows what's in this plan that you have shows a little bit of increase over that, so it's one that still has to be worked through to find that financial solution for that last $2.5 million. And Ms. Von Atchen's working on that, and she'll come up with a good answer for me. But then there's this multi-phase approach where we can come into the rest of the courthouse, which is the legacy building, which you talked about earlier, these fourth and fifth floors, which have been basically out of service for years. The fourth floor is where the old jail used to be, so it was taken out many years ago. So it's looking at that facility and having a good plan going forward as to what we could do with that in relationship to the other buildings and across the street and what might work. So as Jeff said, we'll be bringing that back to you in June. That's not for a financial decision this year, but more for that long-range planning to say, here's some ideas of things we could do and put this in play for the future of these. And they will take years to roll out. And then this building is just another matter. As far as we look at the structural renovations that are required, this is a number we've had out there for a decade. You have to look at it from what's required, and there are different kind of options to come about when we're talking about this facility. So communication centers on this page too is unfunded. Its order of magnitude's different. We'll get that built into the schedule sometime in the future. But these other two are somewhat anomalies when it comes to the total cost of building those in.
You guys are moving up onto the ninth floor with us.
You guys feel that breeze every time?
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
All right,
So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr.
Commissioner Johnson.
While we were talking about unfunded projects, and I just didn't want to wait till I got down to the questions portion. I think it would be good, I've heard it one time already, not tonight, but in a prior conversation, we do need a police station in the Northeast. So I just want to sprinkle that right now, and I will be sprinkling it intermittently as we go forward until we see a police station in the Northeast. And though I would love to see it in District 4, I'm just going to say Northeast in general. I'm willing to share as long as we get something down there. Thank you.
Okay, so really, I just want to touch a couple things. You have the document, should be on the, well, I don't see it in the pages. They should have this key.
It's in there.
Is it in there?
Second to last page.
Okay, so it's toward the back of the, okay, it's in the PowerPoint presentation. So you have the key there that talks about what's changed. If it's in red, those are new. That either means that you're changing for it's an all new or we've modified the amount. Remember, when you look at the different line items there, sometimes it'll be a cash plus debt. So you may see something that costs $500,000 and think, well, that seems like a good deal, but then there's $2 million worth of debt associated with it somewhere else. Or it's a project we funded under the city and the county, so the plus city CI or plus CO plus county, because it's a project that crosses over both budgets. So important to always note that debt as you go through it. I'm going to touch base on 2 pages of this document, and that is the totals on the city debt and then the county debt project. So as you'll notice under the 2017 budget, what we've set out was to stay at 15 million or below. So that's the target line that's up there. In 2017, we had set out a budget and had built pretty hard to keep that below that number. Last year, we moved from this stage, we moved into July, we ended up adding the fire station project, which was a little over $4 million. Now, we pushed some other stuff out to try to help it, but that put us up to the $16.3 million mark. We made that decision, reminding you all, we made that decision last year. So we went over the $15 million debt limit that we've set on ourselves. If you want to stay within that mill levy range, we have to try to stay below that $15 million mark going forward all the time, or we will have to allocate more mills to the debt side. And I think we did that in the strategic session, and we went through it again tonight. That's important if you want to keep that. So right now, we still have some work to do within the budget in 2018. I'm setting at about 16.2 for debt-funded projects that are in here. So as you look at things, if you have any ideas of things you think we ought to cut out, I'm welcome to them. But I will be working to present a budget in the end that gets us below that $15 million mark. In 2019, we're setting way over that mark, so as I look in out years, I have to be close. And part of that is, we've built in something that's new to our plan, and that's saying, let's aggressively go after the fire stations. So I've got another $4.5 million that added in that kind of hit us. And my thought is, we can move some fire stations over to our dedicated sales tax fund. And because generally, we think the fire should get a third of that funding, and I think that's a good opportunity for that. I'm reluctant to do it we can do it and plan on it, but as you recall, that funding ends in 2019 unless that is renewed. So that sales tax has to be renewed, and that'll be something that we'll have to start having a little more of an educational campaign with the public next year, and probably looking for a vote. So before we adopt our budget in 2019, we will know what our decision is, as far as where that dedicated sales tax is. And then we can spread it over a few years and move through it like that. So I show it out there right now. I want to show you I have it in debt. I believe we will have a community to be receptive, because the dedicated sales tax fund has a large amount of money that comes into the Village West area, which is funded by people outside of Wyandotte County. So it's a sales tax that, as long as we have the dedicated sales tax out in place in the Village West area, it's across the whole community. But as we talked about the 12 million, remember there's around 3 million that come into EMS and come into dedicated sales tax that are paid by a lot of other people rather than our residents. So that makes it I guess I look at it and think, hopefully our residents will continue to recognize the value of that, of having other people pay for the infrastructure, and in part, they would pay for some of our new fire stations. And then as we move forward, you can see 2020 is about in line, 2021's got a little more work to do. Kind of the same thing, where we added those $4.5 million in each of the years last year, so it kind of hit us. And then 2022, we're back down. Of course, obviously, we'll have new ideas. So we're not way off stating that. I have $1.2 million worth of work to do for next year. We've done a lot of work on this already, trying to get to the point where we're at. In the out years, that's where some of my general thinking is to get there. On the county side, and this is the area, largely where you see this under the Public Building Commission, so it says county debt, but that's the county debt. County is paying money to go to the Public Building Commission for county-related projects. So when you look in the budget or in the document, you'll see that. Our target there, we're on our target through, well, next year, you see we jump up significantly over that amount, and I'm still working on what that solution is going to be. We jumped up a little bit because of changes, some of the courthouse items. We may be pushing some of those out. And then, of course, the juvenile facility, which went from what we were at 18.5 to about $22 million in order to do what we think would make it the better project for us. I think that's a high initiative and one that we want to do right. So we have to come up with what those solutions are, because right now we have 3 mills dedicated to cover that. And as you recall that chart, we kind of flow over that. Just slightly, the way it current sets, it would be manageable and work fine. But if I add another $7 million to it, that's $500,000 a year, probably, roughly, a little less than that, $350,000, that we would have to add to our annual debt service to make that work, and we need to get that structured in. So just wanted to go over the ones, you typically look at the ones that we have to relate to do the taxes more, so I wanted to go over that point with you. You have all the detail in the sheet, so this gives you a couple weeks to look at it. If you have questions on these, feel free to contact me or any of the public works staff. Jeff's team has the most knowledge of all these areas, or we can bring in also facilities people as well.
I do want to say I'm glad to see a program for our facilities. When we pushed in the recession, we pushed our facilities out by necessity. But when people think of infrastructure, they think of curbs and sidewalks and streets, and we need facilities. That chart you have for a street that shows if you wait so long, it triples in cost to fix it, that's true in our buildings as well. And so having that regular maintenance upkeep for our facilities is ultimately saving taxpayer money. to do it right and to do it on time. And so there is mythology out there that when we spend money on our buildings, that we're just spending it for luxury for our employees. I can tell you, we don't have any employees working in luxury. We need to be regularly upgrading workspace, work environment. We also have to attract and retain talent in the unified government. And so our facilities matter. So I'm pleased to see a program for that. And we need to continue to invest. I mean, you look at our fire stations are a perfect example of decades of neglect. And now they just have to be scraped and replaced. So we don't want that for City Hall. We don't want that for the courthouse. We don't want that for any of our facilities. So I think having that plan is terrific. I appreciate it.
Are there any other questions regarding the presentation this evening?
Commissioner Kane.
We're the quiet zone that we're working on in Edwardsville and stuff like that. I'd like to have a response from the commission of Edwardsville, what their thoughts are on that. We often talk about the state does stuff to us that we don't like and we have to live with. I don't want to do anything to them that would upset them either.
Each of our meetings has included Edwardsville and Bonner Springs as we're looking through that program.
I agree, Mayor, but I've talked to a couple of commissioners on both Bonner and Edwardsville that don't like the idea.
Okay? Thank you. Commissioner?
Mayor, could we just have like maybe a half an hour meeting between the three commissions and hash it out? So hear what everybody has to say?
We have had one of those meetings before. They're pretty complicated to get together. I think the key is, how we do 3-on-3s to get information to our commission. I think we need to do that for Bonner and Edwardsville and make sure their commission's up to date and has input into the process. So I think we can accomplish input into the process, and we're going to need to do it.
And Commissioner Philbrook, I asked Doug the same question, and I got kind of the same answer.
Yeah, I understand.
So, all right. Anything else tonight? All right.
Thank you.
We are adjourned.
Commissioners.